Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton and Kelly Barner right here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Kelly, how you doing?
I am doing good, Scott. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Busy start to the week, but we've got an outstanding conversation teed up
Yes, we do.
right here today.
Yes, we do. And if the green room before the broadcast is any indication, there's going to be a lot of cookie talk, there's going to be a lot of snack talk, and there's going to be a lot of would you try a kind of talk. So I think this is going to be a really engaging hour.
Agreed. We know this continues one of our newest series, well received series, Dial P for Procurement, presented jointly with our dear friends over at Buyers Meeting Point. Kelly, last month I had a couple of folks that really set the bar, right?
Yes, we did.
Each of our shows, January, February, all set the bar. Jeffrey Ostrander and Ragnar Lorentzen in February. It's going to be our work's going to be cut out for us to top that conversation, right?
Absolutely. And, we have a lot of conversations at Supply Chain Now about where do you draw the line if you have to draw one between supply chain and procurement. And I think folks are going to be amazed at how much there is to talk about supplier management. We did a solid hour on it in February. We're going to do a solid hour on it today, and it's going to be completely different. There's so much nuance and value to this area of the business.
That is right. Hey, I want to say hello to a few folks really quick here before we get started here. Pratik is with us via LinkedIn. Great to see you again, Pratik. Peter, in case LinkedIn slows down, he's tuned in via YouTube. Great to see you there. Mahesh via LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us. Ivan, also via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. Vivian, Kavan, Mervin over across the pond there. Mark Preston's with us. Tyrone also via LinkedIn. This is timely. Procurement is something that many love to hate, but it's a necessary evil.
Wow, Tyrone.
Hey, getting started. So this is going to be a great conversation. So I want to share a quick programming note. First off, Kelly, I think as you might have mentioned, Dial P runs every third Tuesday, 12 noon Eastern time, right? So folks can expect, we've got some great guests here today, great guests teed up for the next couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
But if you enjoy this conversation, be sure to check out Supply Chain Now, wherever you get your podcast from. Check out Art of Procurement, which Kelly is a regular on, because you have a lot of similar conversations and you don't want to miss any of them, right?
Absolutely. No, definitely. There's plenty to listen to. There's plenty to watch. If you have even 5 minutes free in your day, I promise we will find a way to fill in.
But today, completely agree with you, Kelly, but today it's about driving innovation through the supplier experience. You hear about customer experience, you hear about user experience, all insert consonant prior to X, and there's an experience community out there. Supplier experience, and we've got two great guests. Are you ready to introduce them, Kelly?
Oh, give them the swoosh.
Let's do it. It is Quentin Roach, Senior Vice President, Supply Chain and Chief Procurement Officer at Mondelez International, and Costas Xyloyiannis, CEO and co-founder at HICX. Hey, good afternoon, Quentin and Costas. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Scott. Hello, Kelly.
Welcome, guys.
It was so much fun pre-show, and as Kelly mentioned, probably some of that will carry over into this conversation. But we got a lot of stuff to get through. Really appreciate both of your time and you both being willing to share your expertise and your POV with our community. It's always a treat. But Kelly, we're going to kind of start with some of the easy stuff, right?
You would think it would be easy. Let's assume these are easy questions. You never know.
So, hey, the lightning round we have a good time with, kind of lightening the mood a little bit before we get into some supply chain leadership stuff. So I want to start with healthy, your favorite snack food, whether it's healthy or otherwise. We've enjoyed Sandra McQuillan with Mondelez speaking about some of the healthy food initiatives that Mondelez has been powering. But let's keep it real for a second. So, Quentin, what's your favorite snack food?
Oh, I don't know, Scott. I'd have to start off with asking, is sushi a snack? That's my favorite food.
It
A lot
is.
about cookies and Oreos, or maybe a sushi Oreo. I'm not sure.
Oh,
That would be the most creative combination yet. But is there a particular type of sushi that's one of your favorites?
I'll actually tell you that's my favorite food. But to answer your question on snacks, and I'll stick with our brands, it's Wheat Thins, and I love Wheat Thin crackers, and I think they're a great snack and a great treat, and little bit healthy too, I think.
I agree. We love wheat thins around here with a sharp cheddar, white cheddar cheese. So it's one of our favorite treats. All right, Costas, how about you? What's one of your favorite snack foods?
I think we already broke into it earlier, but quite cliche, but Oreos are. And I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old who kind of have brought that back into my life.
So you buy them by the pallet, is what you're saying.
Maybe buy them, don't eat them though. But.
Well, as Costas alludes to, we had a big conversation about Oreos in the pre-show. So to our community, there's so many different types of Oreos. I'd love for y'all to weigh in. If you like a certain type of Oreo, drop it in the comments. Or if you want to share what your favorite snack food is, we'll take that as well. Second and final questions. We're looking to get to know Quentin and Costas a little bit better. So we've had no shortage of lessons learned, right, through the pandemic and into 2021. What's been, when it comes to work-life balance, work chases us home, all of us home these days, and perhaps ways never seen before. What's been, Quentin, one of your favorite things you've done to help balance that work and life demand here throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, it's interesting, Scott. I think like everyone, now the new way of working and working from home even blurs that line even further. So something that I've personally done is I've gone back to an old way of working for myself, and that's to disconnect my work access to my mobile device. So I don't have my work email or calendar on my mobile phone. I make sure that as I'm working from my home office, I do all of my work on the laptop and computer in my home office. But when I exit my home office, I don't revert to looking at my mobile device in order to stay disconnected and to try to draw a little bit of a sharper line there. And I find that helps me quite a bit.
I love that, Quentin. And Kelly, I completely butchered that question because it was about a survival tip, but Quentin came through.
That sounds like survival.
That's quite a survival tip.
Yeah.
Costas, same question to you. What's been your secret survival tip when it comes to maintaining that work-life balance?
My secret survival tip, by the way, goes back to a quote which my father gave me about 20 years ago, which has helped me a lot. And I think it goes like this. So it's start by doing what's necessary, then what's possible, and then you're doing the impossible. And it's very, very simple, but it works, and it works across life and across work. So for me, that's something which I've just carried on with me, and it makes sense, hopefully.
I love that.
That's awesome.
So Kelly, I'm gonna share a couple of quick thoughts from our audience related to Oreos. But before I do, Kelly, let me ask you, what's been your survival tip?
One step at a time, right? And actually, so I also have young kids, so I get all of my wisdom mostly from cartoon movies. So this particular piece of wisdom comes from Anna from Frozen, and her advice was do the next right thing. In every single moment, you can only do one thing. Just do the next right thing, and somehow or other, you will get through your day having done what was necessary.
So well said. So well said. It's one of our kids' favorites as well. Benjamin Goldklang is back with us today. He's got some comments here about Oreos. The amount of joy I get from finally having a gluten-free double stuffed Oreo is just great. Been a long way to get good gluten-free foods.
I'm with you, Benjamin.
And so much so that Kelly brought one of her favorite bags right behind her.
I did.
Azalea Davis, if I had to choose lemon Oreos or matcha Oreos, which she had in Taiwan,
matcha is very trendy.
Were the best. I gotta check this out. And Amanda, our own Amanda Luton behind the scenes, golden, regular, lemon, and my new fave, hazelnut Oreos. Such an Oreo fan. It was also the #1 top food I craved while pregnant. I made many grocery trips with our 3 kids. I made plenty of grocery trips to the store. All right, but all blessings. But Kelly, where are we going next?
So I think first we're actually going to sort of stay in this space, but we're going to learn a little bit about what brought Quentin and Costas to where they are. And that's probably one of the best things about getting ready for these Dial P broadcasts is we all get an opportunity to know each other a little bit better. So Quentin, for all of our talk about FMCG, and we're going to spend some time on that in the first half of the live stream, you've worked in a lot of different industries. So if you would share with the audience some of the different spaces that you've worked in and what the things you've noticed are that are different and what sort of seems to be universal between them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kelly. And let me just quickly say two other things. One is I love all the Oreo support, so keep that up. And I'd also say it's great to be back here with Costas. I hadn't seen Costas probably even a year before the pandemic, last in London at a HICX event, and so I'm really happy to be here, and I look forward to what Costas will share too. But certainly from my perspective, I've had the privilege to work in about 7 different industries already in my career, starting off in automotive and working even in healthcare, medical device, pharmaceuticals, FMCG, and even a bit in higher education and academia. So I've seen a lot of different cultures and a lot of different environments across those various industries. But what I would say is always common, Kelly, is the focus on the customer or the consumer.
Yeah.
No matter what that is for the company or the industry, having a great product or service, turning that out with a heavy focus towards quality and compliance on that product and service. And I think that's always been a key to the companies that I've been attracted to, have been their focus on the consumer or the customer as a priority. I would say from a work perspective, and in particularly from a supply chain or a procurement perspective, always important is the relationship building, both internally and externally, for the function and for the work, but also having a view that stays end to end, and really having a broad perspective about how to create value within the enterprise and frankly with your suppliers and partners. I would also say it's always been important to set up what your priorities are and your focus areas would be, regardless of the industry or the company. There's always a ton of things that could be done and need to be done. And from a work perspective, being able to prioritize, I've always found to be a really great priority. And then one last thing I'd say that's been common is people, and a real belief that there's nothing that replaces talent. You can have the best vision and strategy and approach. If you don't have the right talent and invest in the right people, you'll have a difficulty in delivering what you're focused on. So those are the things I think were common in terms of the way we work. There's been a big difference in those industries and companies on the margins that we had, quite frankly, if you think about those industries, or even the ability to develop brand loyalty was a big differentiator. But there are some really common things in the way we work, and more common than different.
Absolutely. And that notion of people is so critical, right? I mean, certainly we're going to talk about that in the context of supplier experience later. But right now, everything is experience, right? It's customer experience, supplier experience, user experience. I think maybe all the time we're all spending shut in is giving us a lot of time to think outward, in terms of how our choices and processes and decisions affect the other people that we do, in fact, work with. So Costas, let me switch over and ask you a question. And this is funny. So you had shared with us when we were getting to know you that you actually founded HICX while you were in college. So my first little question is, as someone who loves procurement, how does a college kid decide that procurement is cool enough to be their future? You can sort of weave that in. But more seriously, what was the core business problem you saw even as a college age student, and you said, yep, that's where I'm going to focus my time and talent?
Well, I'd love to tell you there was an aha moment in college, but the reality was that our foray into this was probably had a lot of twists and turns. But reality was that we had a first customer in college, which was Novartis, a big pharma, in procurement, at an exciting time for them, because in 2000, 2001, pharma industry, I'd say, was behind back then, and it was a change of really high margins to margins getting, tighter and tighter, and patents and things like that. So it was exciting to see that. But what kind of was the aha moment working with them? The then CEO, Dan Vazella, signed up to the UN Global Compact. So very relevant to things like sustainability today. And that was kind of where that started. And he went to their chief procurement officer, who was a great mentor to me at the time, and said, "Oh, Marino, you have to go and get our 150,000 suppliers to comply." And his massive challenge.
Is that all?
Exactly. It started with, the fundamentals. Well, who are the suppliers? How do I contact them? And, it was quite old fashioned. Paper kind of letters to them, Excel questionnaires with email. And that kind of was that chain reaction, because what happened in the years to come was you saw a lot of these things, and that morphed into where sustainability and ESG is today, but a lot of compliance, a lot of regulation. And for us, this has also started to transform where we, it started with data. So data is the foundation. We kind of realized that was the big challenge which hadn't been solved. But then we also saw that there was a need to fix the experience, right? I know it being a supplier myself, right? Ourselves to big companies, all these new things, which are great, it adds a burden, right? So we started to figure out, can we bring these things together? So we didn't just land and get excited about procurement. I probably would have never wanted to get into it, but I found there's a lot of interesting things to solve which haven't been solved, right?
And at scale.
Right. If I can break in really quick before we shift gears here, Mark Preston totally agrees with Quentin. The value stream does not start at your receiving dock. You have to look at your supplier's value stream and build that relationship and extension of your company. Well said, Mark. And Mark does a lot of work with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, by the way. All right. So Kelly, I think we're going to shift gears over to a really fast moving space, right?
Yes, we are. Good pun. Yes, fast-moving consumer goods. So FMCG, and actually, Tyrone, this is for you. I'm going to do my best this episode not to be a necessary evil, or actually an evil of any kind. So no acronyms. That's one of the things procurement takes a lot of hits for. It's funny because we talk about this snacking. So Quentin, I'm going to hold you to account for a quote that your CEO shared. And I think he speaks for the entire universe when he said, quote, "Snacking momentum was extremely resilient during the pandemic." I know that resiliency around snacking was existing in my household. We're now taking daily walks to try to recover from all that snacking resiliency. But even growth isn't always completely good, right? So even huge demand, and we saw in some cases empty shelves, or we saw in some cases supply chain holdups. What opportunities and challenges did you see resulting from the changes in eating and shopping patterns we saw last year?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kelly. And frankly, as you mentioned Dirk's quote, we've been very fortunate, in Mondelez in terms of how the new ways of living have gone with regards to the pandemic and the changing behaviors of consumers. We're blessed to have some tremendously great brands and brands that people, frankly, leaned on and turned to during the pandemic. And so, we've seen great spikes in a great majority of our brands. We've had a few, as well known in our candy and gum area, where we have some recovery to do. But some of our great brands like Oreo that we've spoken about, and many of our other brands like Philadelphia cream cheese and others, have had tremendous demand from consumers, and frankly, an opportunity for us to even take market share in some of these category areas. I think it's been a great thing for us as a company. Our focus is to have the right snacks at the right place, made in the right way for our consumers. And this pandemic, we've been able to do that with great resiliency across the supply chain and the commercial organization in serving our consumers. From a supplier perspective, it has put a lot of demand, not only into our own manufacturing facilities, but across our external manufacturing partnership network, and even down to our suppliers, to manage the demand spikes, both up and down. Fortunately, a lot of them up, but that comes with a lot of volatility and swings in demand. Many of them within the window of our standard lead times, and so that's been a challenge. But we've been blessed with a couple aspects. One is we have great supplier relationships, those that have served not only Mondelez but our suppliers and their sub-tier suppliers, and allowing them to continue their business and drive their business forward even during this time. But we've relied a lot on the data analytics capabilities we put in place so that we could see the demand signals changing and then carry that all the way through to the supply side, as well as monitoring our suppliers to make sure we understood supply signals and the stability of our suppliers and what we needed to do adjust around those aspects as well. So we've seen a lot of that demand spike and a reliance on relationships and data as drivers for us over the last year or so.
So if we look at those relationships and data, though, it certainly sounds like from a team perspective or in your company culture, you've been investing in those relationships for a long time. Did you find that the investments in data quality, in digitalization of processes, in technology that you had made in advance of 2020 also helped you on that journey? Were there any surprises where you figured out, we thought we had fully digitized this process and we hadn't, we need to go back and take another look? Where would you say that balance fell out between relying on the digital versus the relationship?
No, I think it's a great catch. I would say first and foremost, we're not where we need to be fully, right? We're on our journey with regards to our technology roadmap and our data capabilities and really driving our data analytic capability into true data insights that inform our actions and identify the opportunity. So we're still on that journey, but the investments we made prior to the pandemic certainly paid off. I would say it's paid off in both areas, though, Kelly, in terms of reliance on some really strong relationships. But also there was a big movement inside of the company, inside of the broader supply chain, and specifically inside of procurement around data capabilities and the launch of new tools and capabilities for our people. Which we've labeled our IDLES program, and it's been out in some of the trade and professional areas already on what IDLES is doing internal to the company and what capabilities it's even allowing us to do with our suppliers. So those early on investments prior to the pandemic certainly have paid dividends, and I would say it helped us with the identification of where inventories were, helped us understand areas where we were going to be within lead time that we needed to take some extra effort in by the data informing us of that. But lastly, I would say that our technology also showed us where we were still short, right? Where we didn't have the visibility we needed in certain category spend areas, or where we didn't have the technology link between ourselves and the suppliers that made the ease or frictionless business transaction, whether it was through the quoting process or the invoicing process, where we still had suppliers that weren't on our right platforms. And so it did identify opportunities for us to further improve even from where we were prior to and during the pandemic.
If I can cut in on that note there, thank you for sharing, Quentin. And Kelly, by the way, I just realized you don't have one bag of Oreos behind you. You've got three. Well done. You got two nicely hidden back there. I want to share a couple of comments here from the audience related to, and when we're talking supplier experience, driving innovation through supplier experience. So in our community, if you're a supplier or if you manage suppliers, we'd love to get y'all's thoughts throughout the session here today. Peter Bollet says, a great question I used to often ask my suppliers at QBRs was, how do you perceive us as your customer? For me, it was most always informative, and I asked them to be straightforward and not sugarcoat if there were any issues we needed to address. Excellent comments there. And on a different note, Tyrone, who typically holds down a fort for us on YouTube, he's on LinkedIn today. So Tyrone, hope this finds you well. The government procurement U.S. is a super challenge, he says. If corporate procurement is a squid or an octopus with 8 or 10 tentacles, government procurement is a nautilus with 90 tentacles. Interesting. I wonder if Gary Smith is with us, who heads up public sector supply chains. Maybe he can speak to that. All right. So Kelly, where are we headed with Costas next?
So we're actually going to kind of look at the other side of what we just discussed with Quentin. Costas, you've been in a position to work with a number of companies across industries, seeing them look at their own investments in digitalization, maybe disruption to their operations or their business processes. What did you see companies realize over the last 12 months that you probably could have spent hours and days trying to convince them of, but that was suddenly so apparent once they were living through some of the unique challenges we saw last year?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely things which are across the board, right? So we saw a lot of people caught out on missing the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And I can parallel that, with benefits from customers of ours that had invested in digitalization, right? It was, who do I contact at my suppliers? Do I know where they're delivering the goods from, right? This tends to be actually tribal knowledge is what I call it, right? Someone somewhere in the business knows who the right person to
That's
contact
right.
to find this. But that's not how you need to operate in today's day and age. You've got to be fast, right? And that shouldn't take, hundreds of procurement people trying to figure out who to contact to have a view of what's going on in my supply chain. So I think we definitely saw people missing the fundamentals. We also saw this notion of customer of choice becoming more important, right?
Yeah.
It's fine when there's abundant supply, but what happens in a constrained supply environment, which everyone then found themselves in, right? So things which they took for granted. And I think it showed how fragile, right? Very large corporations and the dependency on the supply chain. So I think we've seen a different behavior around customer of choice and how do you become customer of choice. And to the point which was brought up, I forget who asked the question, but we're also seeing people, customers looking at, a supplier NPS, right? So net promoter score, right? If in a constrained supply environment, would you prioritize me over someone else? So pretty interesting topics which are coming out, which I think are very exciting because we need to borrow from other spaces like customer and employee experience. I think more can be done, and looking at the way these relationships work in a more modern way, I would say, right? You can't create value by constantly looking at cost out. Eventually, quality and other things will suffer, or sustainability. Can the supplier survive? So, a lot of interesting topics across industry.
Yeah.
Hey, Kelly, one quick observation. We talked a lot about this at NRF, is how much leverage the consumers have gained in recent years, right? Well, I would argue the same thing. Good suppliers, great suppliers that deliver, and those that you vie for. I've been in certain industries where suppliers had no leverage, but it seems like good quality suppliers have accumulated a little extra leverage in these days as well. So where are we going with, we're going to stick with Costas, I believe, right?
We are. One last question for you, Costas. And this is a very big question, so just general thoughts. What have you noticed about the speed of business where we are today? Because certainly we talk a lot about data quality, but we often talk about data quality for the sake of trust. Because if someone has an opportunity to make a tough call, right, or an opportunistic call, we want them to trust that data so that they can make the decision at the right speed and either avert a problem or build a competitive advantage. Any observations around the general speed of business and how that's being enabled by the solutions we have in place?
Yeah, so I think here there was a requirement from companies to be able to move quickly, right? So that's more apparent, and this meant new suppliers potentially, because you find out my current supplier can't deliver, or existing supplier but shipping goods from somewhere else. This also has a big impact on manufacturing companies, by the way, and that kind of agility which was required. So speed of the being able to onboard quickly. Without having to circumvent compliance processes, right? Because this is also what happens. You can do things quickly, but reality is you also have to do things correctly, because you have to manage risk, you have to manage a whole host of things. So being able to add automation, so you have good data and can do things at scale, enables greater speed. And also, to the earlier point, you have to have the fundamentals in place. You can't be spending time understanding where are goods coming from, where are they, manufactured. A lot of companies, for example, only maintain things like where invoices are paid to, right? This is not the right information to have on hand. So the ability to connect the dots also between systems and being able to have that kind of readily available allows you to decide quickly and confidently.
Yeah, Kelly, if you don't mind, I think
No, of
Costas
course.
brings up some really great points, and I think it is a challenge, and it's the greatest opportunity we have, and that's how do you build the right data integrity, right, and how do you build the trust in the data, right? Just importantly, as I mentioned earlier, it's again then taking that data and being able to have the right skill sets around analytics and the right skill set to really move that data to helping to deliver the insights and the actionable insights that we need
Yeah.
to drive decision making. And I think that's the biggest opportunity that still remains. And I think it's an ongoing one. So I don't say it as a shortfall to current capabilities or current systems or anything like that. I think this is an ongoing continuous improvement aspect of how we look at consumer commerce and the data that flows through not only the physical flows, but the virtual flows, and how we're using that going back into the data from there to drive our actions going forward. And I think that's a really big opportunity for all of us in the profession and all of those suppliers and partners in the business that are helping with technology and helping with data as well.
Well, and in particular, you guys, I know, describe it at Mondelez as from the shelf back to the field, right? Which sounds logical, right? You're starting with the consumer perspective and you're working your way all the way back down through the supply chain. But I think where a lot of procurement individuals and teams might actually struggle with that idea is you're dealing with certainly demand signals, but you need to get that to flow back through Mondelez all the way back down into the supply chain. And I have to think that connecting those two very separated points has to be influencing your data strategy. Is that playing a role in terms of how you manage the data?
Absolutely. We're really trying to make sure that we move from kind of just having the end-to-end view and coming from, as you said, from the shelf back to the field, really looking at it through the actual physical flows, the data flows, how they all match together and how they continue to, start with the demand signals and the supply signals coming in from both ends to determine how we work across our entire value stream. And there's a lot of work going on with regards to this, and some of it driven by the pandemic, but frankly, the majority of it driven by the strategy that we're under with regards to the supply chain transformation underway here at Mondelez International. And at the center of that is a centralization of our analytics team to help us work through how do we get better and better at this every day in looking from shelf back to the field.
Absolutely.
And so that end-to-end view, but all of the aspects, physical, virtual, data, et cetera, are all important in how we do that work going forward.
Absolutely.
So, Kelly, I think you're going to quote the famous philosopher Greg White here, right?
Yes, I know. We're gonna tag one of our good friends here at Supply Chain now. He's the host of Tequila Sunrise. You're welcome, Greg. He said one of the things very casually in a conversation to me in 2020 that truthfully has informed a lot of how I've approached supplier management now in 2021. And he said with regard to 2020 that now is not the time to make new friends. Now, whether he meant to be deep or not, if you're in procurement, if you're in supply chain, yeah, that's a harsh reality. You've either been a good friend and you have friends to lean on, or you've not and nobody will help you out. But it's a really difficult time to bring in new people to help you dig out of the hole. So Quentin, from that perspective, talk to me a little bit about what supplier experience means specifically at Mondelez, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the processes and technology that you're using to bring that about.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and one that I mentioned a bit earlier around, our focus on supplier partnership excellence started even before the pandemic. And some of the great relationships that we had actually served us tremendously well as we found ourselves in the pandemic and some of the volatility that was required. And we had suppliers that stepped up in massive ways to partner with us and deal with the ambiguity and the volatility that we saw going into the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, and even to some degree, we still see a bit today. Yeah. Those partnerships have really centered around everything from our strategic partners and those that we have large relationships with, and our ability to focus with them as as Costas said, in some ways as customer of choice.
Yeah.
When constraints were in place and really relied on our relationships to help us through some tight periods. We did some things with suppliers as well who found themselves in tight periods, and we were able to be flexible in either in short supply or taking extra supply because of the demand. So it has gone both ways, and we've always tried to keep it mutual. But I think the strategic part of this also has to go through every supplier of ours. And so it's not just about the strategic and large relationships, but we have to make ourselves the customer of choice. So how are we making doing business with Mondelez easier and more efficient and more effective every day? Are we putting in place the right technology interfaces with each other? Are we having the right communications, even starting all the way back to being really clear about what our supplier expectations are, about opening up the right tools and capabilities with our suppliers and having the right connection points with them? And then even to the point of new suppliers, because I think Greg's probably right, a heavy reliance on who you know. But I think one of the great essence of the work is in those spaces like Costas mentioned, sometimes your current supplier said they couldn't make it through. So we were looking at new processes to say, how do we bring on a new supplier, making sure first and foremost that we do it in a compliant way. But what we actually found in throughout the pandemic is we were able to work much faster with much greater agility, really cross-functionally inside the company in ways that we didn't think existed before the pandemic. And I think that's the great learning opportunity for us, that in the crisis, how did we make sure we were able to stay compliant, but get rid of some of those things that we thought weren't possible to do? And we were able to do them more quickly. And that included being open to new suppliers, listening, driving innovation, driving sustainability and value creation, even with new folks, even though we might have depended on our most trusted relationships and suppliers most heavily. We found opportunities to bring new partners on board in really quick ways.
Gosh, there's so much in what Quentin just shared there. I got my 17 pages notes in early. That customer of choice is such a powerful phrase. I remember being a supplier in the manufacturing space. We all probably can relate. Sometimes you get phone calls from customers that you look forward to, even if it was a big problem you're working through. And we can all probably remember some of those phone calls you never like to get them, regardless of what it was we're going to talk about. And a lot of that goes to how dedicated they were to being a good customer. So I love that, Quentin. Share a couple of quick comments. And Costas, I'm coming for you. We're going to be talking about friction here in just a minute. Sylvia, fashionably late in Charleston. Hey, welcome to the conversation, though, Sylvia. Great to have you. Kavan says #supplier relationship management, SRM. It's the name of the game today. Victor, good morning from the West Coast. Hope this finds you well. Victor, I think up in the Portland area. Azalea says taking inventory on these relationships and customer satisfactions helps us put perspective on what we offer as an organization, as well as defining customer needs. Needs are evolving, and sometimes it's human nature to forget to be consistent in asking these questions and evaluating our relationships. Marriages can fail because of this. Just imagine the intimacy lost between industry and consumer. Kelly, Azalea, man, that sounds like something Shakespeare would write.
I know.
We have to get her back in the fold again.
I know, absolutely.
So let's talk about friction for a second here. And by the way, we got to say hello to Jeff Ostrander, who was with us last week. Hope this finds you well, Jeff. All right. So Costas, let's talk about friction. So for better or for worse, one of the causes of friction between companies and suppliers, of course, is the technology, right? Technology can bridge us all together, but sometimes it can cause this right here to happen, right? And to our listeners that might be listening to the replay, that was butting of heads there. So what should be in a perfect world the standards for a frictionless digital supplier experience, Costas?
Yeah, well, I want to also pick up on one comment which Quentin made around, end-to-end and working cross-functionally, because I think that oftentimes when it comes to suppliers is forgotten, and that is also where the friction comes, right? It's not just procurement dealing with suppliers. There's a lot of other functions which will touch the supplier before, after, in consuming their services and materials, but you need to think end-to-end. And when you look at that supplier experience end-to-end, cross-functionally, that's where things start to make more sense. So technology, one of the issues in friction is many systems, right? And as I said, it could be in procurement, but you have different systems for direct versus indirect, different systems around quality and compliance, different systems for sustainability, different systems for innovation. There's a lot of processes which now different parts of the business are doing with their suppliers, right? And there's nothing wrong with many systems, by the way, because we're a fan and we're pushing that, and you'll have seen that best of breed is kind of here to stay. And the reason for that goes that if you want great digital experiences, the same way as it happened in the consumer side, you don't go with a one size fits all. That does not deliver that great experience, right? Great experience comes with well thought through, specific use cases which are tailored to that particular need, right? So, the need for great experience means a lot of systems, but that can now be made to work together. So what we're looking and seeing is, come up with a unified portal which is going to guide the experience, right? On board once, on board, but end to end, not just for procurement or for quality or for compliance or for supply chain. Do it in a way which is onboarding for the enterprise, right? End to end. That will also speed up things for the organization, but also decreases the friction, right? Imagine a supplier having to be onboarded in 10 different systems. That is not efficient for them. So you can really do some basics. The other element comes in communication channels. I know that as a supplier, but who do I communicate to find out something, right? That often is not something which is quick to do, right? You get bounced around. You start with who you know. Equally, how you are communicated to, right? Single channel goes back to that central portal and communication point, drives better engagement in an efficient way, right? They don't have to hear 10 different messages from different functions. And then I would say provide as much self-service as possible. We are also seeing that as consumers, and I love to draw on what happens in the consumer space and also in the customer space, because I think procurement and suppliers are kind of following at a later pace. But self-service, you don't want to go in branch to your bank, right? You're going to go online and do all of those things. And I think the same thing is going to go with suppliers, right? Can they change their bank details, ask you for a tax exemption certificate, check the status of their invoices, provide you, trade compliance information, all these things in a self-serve manner. So I think little things actually can remove a lot of friction. Sometimes people, I think, are thinking too strategic around removing friction, right? Suppliers, not everyone's going to be super strategic, but you can do a lot to just make their life very easy and a lot of more efficiency for the organization.
Well said there, Costas. We're going to talk about Vilfredo Pareto here in just a second. I want to share a couple of comments here. Jonathan Townsley, supplier optimization is key to driving value for the business and customer. Jonathan, well put, and great to have you here as part of the live stream. Hope you and the family are doing well. Let's see. Anissa's already got some key takeaways, and she probably, just like me and Kelly, after hearing Quentin and Costas here, some takeaways so far. Supplier relationships are very important. Growth is not always good. Apply data analytics to get signals and demand changes and understand suppliers. The earlier you start with your data and technology journey, the better. Large corporations have large supplier dependencies. And finally, Aaron Peterson's with us. Aaron, he says he feels like a sponge here, just taking it all in. So happy to be here for this. Quentin, thank you. And Aaron, we're keeping our eye on your big announcement. You owe us a big announcement you shared from last live stream. Okay, so Costas, Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist from centuries and centuries ago. The Pareto principle, right? 80-20 and beyond some, but a fascinating figure in history. A lot of companies will segment their supply base into the good old 80-20 rule or some other different ways, different factions. How do you find that to be an effective strategy, and would you recommend that or maybe something else?
So here I would also, again, lean on what Quentin said. I would not. I think it's no longer cutting it, right? You have to think of all of your suppliers. That's not to say there isn't mechanisms to prioritize, but I don't think it's 80-20 anymore. And I always challenge this 80-20 rule because a lot of people focus on the 80% without knowing the 100%. And obviously there's a flaw in that. You can't know what 80% is if you don't have visibility of the 100%.
You make Vilfredo very proud with that comment there, Costas.
Fair enough. I lost the.
No, you're saying that you can't, if you don't know 100%, you can't really nail down the 80%.
Exactly. So I think, for me, this doesn't cut it. And I also draw on parallels from business. So I think, when you also look at employees and employee structure, sure, you have your best employees, but the business runs on middle management, so to speak, right? And I draw on this kind of parallel for suppliers and supply chain and procurement. You are not running your entire business off of your top suppliers. Whilst they're very important and have high impact, your business is running with that whole middle tier as well. And you need to set them up for success. And I've drawn on a great analogy here in the sense that look at employee experience. So 50 years ago, it was, you're lucky to have a job, shut up and get on with it type of thing.
Right.
It was. And now it's, the war for talent, right? It's all about great employee experience, do whatever you can. And it was just logical that they're not a resource, right? If you make it very easy for them to operate, they will give you their best work. And I don't get why are we not looking at ways to apply the same philosophy within suppliers and supply chain? Why do we think that cost out and not looking at more creative ways to improve supplier experience and how that will deliver value to the whole organization? And I think, Mondelez and FMCG, these companies are actually leading in this area. I would say they have the most maturity and reliance on suppliers, right? It's a nature of the industry that they're really taking this to heart and leading the way.
So much goodness there, Costas. I tell you and Quentin, y'all should take your show on the road. You're quite a 1-2 punch. We're getting a lot of comments that we can't get to all of them, but really appreciate what you're sharing. Kelly, we want to stick with Quentin here. And Quentin, it's not, when it comes to suppliers and what we're trying to do with suppliers or as customers, it's not just about doing what we're trying to do now and just do it smoother. But we're trying to innovate and drive innovation. And you've already kind of alluded to some of the things, but what else are some Mondelez priorities when it comes to real, meaningful, non-cliche innovation?
Yeah, let me say, Scott, I think something that Costas shared throughout his comments is really important, and that's this idea of what our technology ecosystem looks like, right? And this idea that we have separate business use cases that have formulated the capabilities and tools we have in the organization, or we've gone out and bought best of breed kind of capabilities and tools across many areas of our work. The real key then is to understand how those work together and how we integrate them, what our ecosystem looks like today, and how we draw a technology roadmap to the future with all of those capabilities still being delivered, but in a more integrated way. Because I think what Costa said about having to onboard a new supplier to 10 different systems is the difficulty, right? Even if they're the best breed and have the best use cases, if you're not able to bring everyone together and truly get that in an integrated way, I think you fall short of what your ideals are around these tools and capabilities and making them truly frictionless. I think from the supplier experience, that's a part of it as well, in terms of making sure that as we look at our supply partners, that we're really looking at them in the sense that they are a part of an integrated and interdependent network that ultimately serves the consumers that we have. And that includes our internal manufacturing and supply capabilities, as well as our external ones, and all the way back to the field of understanding even our sub-tier suppliers and their capabilities, their connectivity, and how easy it is to make sure that we're efficiently doing business. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do. It is going back on all of our expectations with our suppliers, all of our capabilities back towards and through innovation, through sustainability, through quality and compliance, and really driving with our suppliers a holistic look of moving beyond a procurement function to a true supplier management and a supplier engagement function. Really looking at all aspects of our work together, from product and process, and trying to deliver on the totality of CSER, corporate social environmental responsibility as well, and going through economic inclusion and diversity, having an impact on the communities in which we operate. Those are the big things that we want to try to build into our supplier management function and ultimately to our supplier partnerships and our supplier experience.
Man, very holistic, all big picture approach there, where it seems like to me, Quentin, everyone can win. And as Mondelez makes gains, suppliers are going to make gains right along with them. And those are kind of relationships I can harken back that I really enjoy, back to those phone calls you want to get, right?
Yeah.
Before we move on, I think we're going to wrap with talking talent. And Quentin, I love what you shared earlier. But before we do, I want to share a couple comments. I also want to give Kelly, while I share these comments, Kelly and Costas, if y'all have any piggyback comments on what Quentin just shared there, would love to take that. Let's share a couple of these. Let's see. Rekha Lee Punch says, thank you for all this valuable information and discussion. Very well received. Hello from South Florida. Hope this finds you well, Rekha. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Aaron says, businesses that take the time and resources to think about and invest in end-to-end supplier relationship management now will be better prepared for the future overall, as well as for the next crisis that we inevitably will face together. One of the big four said every 3.7 years, I think we're going to see a major crisis. I hope they are very wrong there. We'll see. I think that Quentin's quote is this one here that Amanda grabbed. Onboard a supplier end to end, not just for procurement, but for the entire enterprise. Simple but powerful advice. I want to share Victor, going back to getting into procurement. He says, we don't usually seek out a procurement career. Yeah. We tend to fall into procurement and then fall in love with it. How about that, Kelly?
Hey, I mean, that worked for me. Everybody should feel that way.
There's a ton of comments. We're not going to get all of them, but I want to share this one as well. Jeff says supplier criticality is a first key segmentation, going back to what we're talking with Costas about the 80-20 rule and beyond. What is important to your business? Then it's a matter of their relative position in either the 4-box or 6-box management approach. So much thought leadership and POV to get to today, Kelly and Costas and Quentin. Tough to fit it all in an hour. But Kelly, let's start with you. Based on what Quentin just shared and Costas just shared, what's a key thing to kind of keep front and center?
You know, I think the thing is, and this extends across everything that we've discussed, you can't fake actually caring about any of this, right? And I think this combines, Quentin, all of the things that you discussed around partnering with suppliers, or if need be, supplementing suppliers that are having trouble producing. And Costas, your point as well about the fact that sometimes maybe we overthink the supplier experience thing. Maybe it's the simple source of friction. Like Philip Eidson, I think when he joined us last time, he pointed out, just pay your suppliers on time, right? It's not that complicated, but it makes an enormous difference. It's those small, consistent, common sources of friction. If we can attack those first, that's where an awful lot of the value comes from. It's figuring out where those sources of friction are in your organization.
Very well said. All right. So looking at time, I didn't realize it was 12:53. So I want to protect Quentin and Costas' time here. I want to get your quick comment on talent and really ensuring we've got not only an apt workforce pipeline coming into the industry, but make sure we have opportunities for all, regardless of walk of life. So Costas, if we could start there, one succinct bullet point around, making sure we've got, enough talent coming into the industry to fuel global supply chain and make sure we're providing opportunities for all. Your thoughts?
So I think, to be honest, Quentin's gonna have better insights on this in terms of talent for global supply chain, Scott. But I can say that it's across the board. In any industry, most businesses today are people businesses, right? So, yeah. And I draw on the example I gave earlier. It's all about employee experience, and it's a war for talent, right? I know that in my organization that to move the needle forward, so it doesn't matter the size or the function, you totally rely on the best people, and also providing an environment where they can do their best work, right? I think the two go hand in hand.
Well said. And Costas, I would just disagree with you. You both are sharing golden nuggets here today. And Quentin, I'm going to get your take here in a minute. But more folks need to hear your story, Costas. You founded this this global player when you're still in college, and the awareness of the opportunity that is in global supply chain helps bring people in. As Azalea says, I'm voting for Quentin and Costas in the next election, POTUS and VP. I love that, Azalea. Quentin, your take on keeping talent coming in and making sure we provide opportunity for all.
Yeah, and I think, Scott, I'll be quick, but Costas is being a bit coy, right? I mean, he and his team are doing a great job of one of the most fundamental capabilities we need in the future, and that's around data and technology, and how we make sure that supply chain professionals, procurement professionals in this case, really become adept not only at the technology and the data analytics capabilities, because that's what's got to drive the insights and the action planning and the opportunity identification for the future. But I think broader in terms of talent, we have to make sure that within procurement, within supply chain, we're generating great business leaders of the future with great functional skills, but great business acumen as well. I think that's what's going to be important, is making sure that we are developing people with future capabilities, not only for the work we need today, but a workforce that can take advantage of the opportunities that the future is going to present, and how we have that forward-looking view on talent, just like we need to have forward-looking view on many things in our organization and get predictive about what it's going to take to be successful in the future. I think that's one of the biggest talent opportunities for us in this profession, in the broader supply chain as well.
Well said, Quentin. You're bringing it so reliable. Thomas says he agrees with Azalea. Like Quentin said, it's about being a customer of choice. Yeah. And Kelly, beyond just lip service there, I hear real action in what Quentin has conveyed here, and that's one of the best parts of this story here today. But Quentin and Costas, we have approached the end of our time. Thanks so much for your time over the last hour. Let's give you a chance to make sure folks know how to connect with both of y'all. And Costas, let's start with you.
Yes, I think easiest way, I'm active on LinkedIn. So I don't do a lot of social media, but LinkedIn I do. I find it relevant. So everyone who I'm interested to hear, by the way, people's views on the content. We can geek out on it. So just ping me on LinkedIn.
And to make it easy, we've got your LinkedIn profile in the show notes along with Quentin. And Quentin, how can folks compare notes with you?
I would say the same thing. You can always reach out on LinkedIn, and I try to stay active and up to date there. Don't do a great job of it all the time, but I try to. And I would lastly say as well, on MondelezInternational.com, we have a supplier portal and supplier page there, and we take comments and input there as well. And happy to connect with folks and happy to learn from others as well. So forward to it.
Outstanding. Well, on behalf of Kelly Barner and our entire Supply Chain Now team, thank you both. We've been talking with Quentin Roach, Senior Vice President, Supply Chain and Chief Procurement Officer with Mondelez International, and Costas Xyloyiannis, CEO and co-founder at HICX. Thank you to you both.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We were having so much fun. I'm taking notes and trying to make sure we cover all the great things we want to share with our pose to Quentin and Costas. And I look down, it's almost time. I hate that.
That's what happens when you think about procurement, Scott. The time where does it go? We could just stay here all day. We could never leave.
I agree with you. And what a great 1-2 punch. I agree with Quentin. Costas was being coy. There's so much more to that story that I bet can inspire and bring people into technology, which is certainly the here and here now and future supply chain, along with great talent that makes it happen. So, all right. So Kelly, I'm going to ask you, like I like asking Greg and Corinne and everyone else, all you gurus, what was your favorite item that Quentin or Costas or maybe even one of our community members shared here today?
I think my big takeaway wasn't actually anything that anybody said. It was that you can sit back and listen to Costas and listen to Quentin and think to yourself, especially since we raised talent right near the end, you can't teach that. You can't train that into someone. A person is either in the right role and cares about what they're doing, cares about their work, cares about their company, or they don't. And no amount of training or instruction or education is going to change that. And so surrounding yourself with people who care and want to work hard and enjoy their work, look at what you can do when you put two people and the organizations that they represent, like Costas and Quentin, together. I mean, that is like next level stuff.
Hearing from Quentin and hearing kind of one of the leaders behind a brand that everyone knows, and brands everybody knows, it's going to make those Oreos taste even better. I mean, really, because the culture. I mean, and
Yes.
Quentin's. We've heard from several leaders from Mondelez, and whenever you interview a senior leader, what they say, they really they tend to exhibit the culture that that the organization embodies, and it's really interesting and intriguing to hear what Quentin and the team are doing over at Mondelez. So I got to share this right before we go here. So Peter Bollet is a regular part of our live streams, and he has recently added YouTube to his 60-inch plasma TV, and he's talking about how it's enhanced his user experience. So love that, Peter, and keep it coming. Okay, so Kelly, always a pleasure. How can folks connect with you and the Buyers Meeting Point team and Art of Procurement? How can folks connect with you all?
Absolutely. Easiest way is just find me on LinkedIn. If you find me, I'll send you to Buyers Meeting Point. I'll send you to Art of Procurement. I'll send you to Supply Chain Now. I might even send you to Greg. Maybe he'll have some extra wisdom.
He will certainly impart. I'll tell you, I love old Greg. I'm interviewing him Thursday. And in particular on his supply chain technology experience that you don't always get to share our story since we're interviewing everyone else.
True.
And I'm looking forward to that. So it's just been fun to do that with you and him and Corinne and everyone else. So everyone, we got one more announcement here from Aaron. All right, Scott, he says, this is Aaron Peterson. I can't make my announcement until April. I'll have to speak with HR to see exactly what I can and can't say in my announcement, but I promise very soon. And I actually have double the great news. Hey, how about that?
All right.
So Aaron.
Well done, Aaron. Well, if you want to break it on Dial P, third Tuesday at noon Eastern, I'd be honored to help you break your news.
Love that. And we met Aaron and a contingent from Morgan State University out at a trade show last February. Or February 2020, and had a great time interviewing him and others. So great program there. All right. So Kelly, if folks want to learn more, make sure y'all connect with Kelly. We've got her information in the show notes. If you like what you heard here today, be a part of all of our conversations. You can learn more at supplychainnow.com. Join us on Dial P every third Tuesday, 12 noon Eastern time. You can also check us out at our standing live streams Mondays and Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern time as well. Kelly, all pleasure is all mine here today. Really enjoyed Quentin and Costas. Thanks so much to them and their teams. Big thanks to my partner in crime, Kelly Barner. Everyone, hope you have a wonderful day. Hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. On that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.